A national heat stress advisory has been launched as Singapore and the rest of the world feel the effects of rising temperatures. You'll be able to assess the risks while also receiving tips on beating the heat and staying cool. The advisory sits within the MyENV mobile application and weather information website. Heat stress levels are displayed in colour codes based on the user's location. Green represents a low heat stress level. That's when temperatures are at 31 degrees Celsius or lower. No cause for concern, and we can all continue as per normal. Then, once it hits moderate or between 31 and 33 degrees, the code turns amber. Now, that's when you should stay indoors more, drink more water, and take regular breaks. Also, avoid multiple layers of clothes and wear a hat or carry an umbrella. Watch out, too, for symptoms of heat-related illnesses such as heavy sweating or dizziness. Now, red, that is when the risk reaches high or above 33 degrees. Avoid outdoor activities, but if you must, you should cool your body during breaks by pouring water over your arms and legs. Another trick is to wear clothing that's made of lightweight and light-coloured materials.
This advisory actually applies to general public and is for prolonged outdoor activity. So you're just walking from your home to the bus stop, it's probably not necessary to follow it. But if you're thinking about going out for a run or bringing your family out for a picnic for some time, please check this information on MyENV before you make that decision to go.
These heat stress levels will be tracked by a thermal environment monitor that are placed at 9 locations island-wide. Such devices will be rolled out in more locations gradually, so users can get accurate real-time data on heat conditions wherever they are. Clara Lee with more on this report.
It's hot. That must be on most people's minds at this stadium. But when is it too much to handle?
During the run, I would know because if it's really burning hot and it's getting to my head, I will definitely take a break and until the weather break.
I usually check the weather on my phone before I go out on a run. So if it's too hot, I usually run in the gym.
It would really help for us to have a mobile application that shows the humidity for runners like us, because we can't really tell nowadays like what's the best time to run because the weather is ever changing. We can't really tell. It's very unpredictable nowadays.
That's where this device comes in, a wet bulb globe temperature station, or WBGT for short. It not only tracks air temperature and humidity, but also solar radiation and wind speeds. This makes it the obvious choice for a tropical climate like Singapore's, and the most suitable for a new heat stress advisory. The data collected will be available on the National Environment Agency's mobile application, helping users make informed decisions when planning their outdoor activities. Moving forward, more WBGT stations will be rolled out in other parts of Singapore.
More, we're joined by Associate Professor Jason Lee. He's Director of the Heat Resilience and Performance Center at NUS. He's also a member of the Heat Stress Guidelines Expert Panel. Professor Lee, just a very quick look at what we just saw. So, for example, heat stress for different levels. So below 31 degrees Celsius, between 31 and 33 degrees Celsius. These are obviously temperatures which are not generally life-threatening if we're not lying in the sun for, 24 hours, assuming the sun is that strong for that long. But if we're looking ahead to more extreme weather events, do you think, as an expert, we are actually on track to experience the kind of heat wave that is actually life-threatening without active intervention?
Foremost, it is important to know heat wave by simple definition is the occurrence of sustained high temperatures. While there is no universally accepted definition of heat wave, they are generally understood to be a time of extreme temperatures with a duration of 2 days or more. Note the approach here is largely mathematical, you may call it. So moving ahead, I think we should incorporate epidemiological data, for example, ambulance dispatches, GP visits, A&E admissions, accidents, just to name a few, during extreme heats, to strengthen our current heat stress advisory. Singapore is heating up fast and is projected to experience an increase in daily mean temperature of close to 5 degrees C by the end of this century. So no, it is not just about an increase in daily mean temperature. This also means more extreme temperatures and higher frequency of warmer days in front of us. So this advisory is very timely.
Professor Lee, with the increased temperatures that we appear to be facing, how prepared are we, though, in dealing with the extreme heat that comes with it? And also, how well is the public sort of armed with the right knowledge to deal with that heat? Do we have the infrastructure as well to deal with it? And the correct social policies, are they in place?
I think our government is proactive in preparing us to deal with extreme heat. And I don't think we'll stop with just this set of heat stress advisory. As mentioned, the strategy intent here is to first create awareness that extreme heat stress can be bad if we don't know how to deal with it. Heat, unlike other environmental stressors, is very specific in terms of how it impacts each of us directly and indirectly. So correct education must be first in place. It's required to augment personal knowledge on heat management. Infrastructure-wise, as you go about upgrading the nation, right? Will we be preparing more ambulances and hospitals to tackle this issue? Or go upstream, say provide cooling shelters in residential areas for the vulnerable populations during extreme heat? I think the latter is wiser. Likewise, the relook of social policies pertaining to protection against extreme heat stress is required. Maybe the allocation of cooling facilities or mandating shaded tents with fans for workers. So just to name a few. So just as solutions need to be contextualized, right? Policies must be customized. So taken as a whole, heat is creeping in very slowly on us. We are like, I always say, like the boiling frogs for the longest time. Our leeway is getting very tight. It's time to know we are being cooked so that sustainable solutions, not just solutions, they must be sustainable, can be taken to safeguard our well-being, health, and safety.
All right, I'll pick you up on that allegory of slowly being cooked. Now, outdoor being cooked is very different from indoor being cooked. So I think, for example, exposure to sunlight, that's one kind of danger. So in principle, being indoors, you are spared that kind of SPF exposure. However, there are other dangers from being indoors if we do not know how to manage indoor heat. Any recommendations for that would be separate or different from how we would manage outdoor heat stress?
You are absolutely right that this set of heat stress advisory, while focusing on outdoor exposure for the general public, we got to start somewhere, right? So indeed, some indoor conditions can also be hot. Maybe hawkers working under thermal stress and therefore compromising their work productivity and health. Thermal discomfort in classroom potentially degrading one's ability to learn, or poor ventilation, lack of cooling in places where our vulnerable ones reside in. So in tandem with this advisory to create the first awareness, we hope to progressively look at the impacts of heat stress in each of those conditions mentioned and beyond, so that targeted strategies can be formulated.
Professor Lee, social isolation, especially among the elderly, that it is associated with higher heat risk rates from heat waves. How prevalent is this anticipated to be in Singapore's context, for example? Do we have adequate research in place given our aging population?
Yeah, you're right. The elderly are generally less conditioned in the first place and therefore have limited physiological capacity to deal with any stress, in this case, heat stress. Many of them are also sick, and then chronic illness can compromise their ability to lose heat. And then coupled with some of those medications for treating their diseases, some of those can compromise ability to lose heat. So all these risk factors put the elderly at greater risk. So we need to start weaving in thermal aspects and considerations in our future work. Some work in this area, heat and the elderly, has already commenced looking at behaviors and physiological thresholds at various environments and conditions. But more must be done in face of our aging society, and we must prevent them from being isolated during extreme heats. And therefore, a call out to incorporation of other disciplines, behavior, implementation, social sciences with innovative engineering solutions, and more to tackle this wicked issue collectively.
It's important that we continue to look out for each other amid these rising temperatures and extreme heat. Professor Lee, thank you very much for that. We've been speaking there to Associate Professor Jason Lee from the Heat Resilience and Performance Center at NUS.
With more temperature monitoring stations on the way, users will be able to get a better sense of how temperatures can fluctuate even within Singapore. Clara Lee looks at how this might affect urban planning in this country.
Singapore is known sometimes as a concrete jungle, sometimes as a city in nature. The truth is, both these descriptions are accurate. Our central business district, for example, is a dense marsh of modern skyscrapers. Other parts, as you can see by the amount of green on the map, are full of trees and plants. Now, did you know that this diverse landscape means that temperatures can vary by up to 4 degrees Celsius depending on where you are? That's because of something experts call the urban heat island effect. Areas with lots of buildings tend to trap heat, while places with more greenery cool down faster. To show you what I mean, I'll be visiting 3 areas in Singapore with this thermal environment monitor. This is what experts use to tell what an area's ambient temperature is. To start us off, I'm headed for the Central Business District. Here in the CBD, we're surrounded by urban infrastructure like buildings, roads, and lots of vehicles. Studies have shown that urban areas like this have increased the overall temperature of the entire island by up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So what's the temperature here like? Well, let's take a look. It's at 35.2 degrees Celsius. That's about 4 degrees Celsius higher than the current island-wide average. In fact, I'm starting to work up quite a sweat, so I think it's time for a change in scenery. Not many people here at Lim Chu Kang, where the landscape is much flatter than what many are used to. All this greenery absorbs less heat than concrete, and I must say it feels cooler than it did in the CBD. But what does the thermometer say? 28 degrees Celsius. That's lower than the island-wide average. These plants and trees are so effective at solving the heat problem that authorities have pledged to plant 1 million more trees island-wide by the end of the decade. Now let's head somewhere more familiar. This is a housing estate in Punggol, and you'll immediately notice that there are patches of green incorporated throughout the residential area. As I've shown you on my trip to Lim Chu Kang, greenery brings temperatures down, and that's why this is all intentional. Urban planners built in as much foliage as they could when designing this estate. So let's check out the temperature here. It's at 29.7 degrees Celsius. Not quite as low as Lim Chu Kang, but definitely lower than in the CBD. With climate change being a very real problem, there's a greater urgency for urban planners to bring temperatures down, even as they accommodate higher population densities in their cities. And that means the race to innovate is heating up.